Thanks, everybody. It's great to have you here today to hear about some very exciting work that the National Coalition for Community Capital is doing. And very briefly, NC3 is a 501c3, and we are about advancing the idea of community members investing. So one of the things my colleague Brian Beckon will talk about shortly is how hard that is, and it seems like it shouldn't be. But as the world has evolved here in the U.S., we've really been divided into two camps: accredited investors, about the top 10% of wealth in the community, in the country, and non-accredited investors, the other 90% of us. And for non-accredited investors, investing has been different. So why do we want people investing? So there's a lot of reasons for it, but on some very fundamental levels, the local banks that we used to have in our communities are basically gone. And so the people that are making decisions about what happens in our communities often don't live in our communities, may not even live in our states, may live on the other side of the country. And those people have a spreadsheet in front of them, and they don't know you, and they don't know me, they don't know the people in your community. Our kids don't go to school together. We don't share our dreams together. And so we want to change that. And we know we need to fix some things in order to happen. To say nothing about issues like equity, about what happens when community members invest. What do those businesses look like? For traditional capital, they very often don't look much like the people who live in those communities. For community capital, that stuff that comes from the regular folks that live in a community, it can look a lot more like those. So we have some great data from investment crowdfunding that shows that women founders, for example, are getting invested in about 50% of the time. Last year, in 2023, venture capitalists gave 3% of their capital to women founders. So that's not very good, and we don't think it's very good either. So we're introducing the idea of community investors investing, and not just an individual project. We are fans of investment crowdfunding, and great stuff has been happening in the investment crowdfunding world. But for us, we want it to be perfectly normal for you as a citizen of your community, wherever it is, to invest in a fund in your community that would turn around and invest 100% of its resources back into the community. And that's our challenge right now. So investment crowdfunding, good. Community investment funds, even better. And so that's where we're at. That's what we're working on. And I'm going to pass the baton to my good friend and genius attorney in securities law. I like to set the bar really high for him. Brian Beckon, who's going to talk about diversified community investment fund. He won't take credit, but let me tell you, this is his strategy. He and his team at Pathlight Law developed this really smart strategy that Jessica is going to prove in the real world for us.
These kinds of investment funds are heavily regulated, as you can imagine. They're regulated under a law called the Investment Company Act of 1940. And I won't go into too much detail about that because it gets into a lot of boring details. But bottom line is, if you're going to build a fund, you need to find an exemption strategy that allows you to do that without having to go through the very expensive registration process. By the way, that registration process it's not just a process that's expensive. If you're a fully registered fund, there are a lot of substantive limitations that basically make it impossible to do what I just described. That is to say, a fund that serves a community that can invest in local businesses in the private equity markets and allow anybody in the community to invest in it. That sounds very simple. You'd think it'd be, of course that should be possible. Actually, it's not possible because of that Investment Company Act of 1940. Now, there are some what we might call workarounds. There are some ways of getting there, but you've got to carefully navigate through those requirements. Now, one of the things that you can do without having to register with the SEC under the Investment Company Act is a real estate fund. For whatever reason, the SEC and Congress thought that, well, real estate funds don't need to be regulated as much as other kinds of funds. So you can build a real estate fund that can raise capital, invest in real estate, share profits with your community investors. And by the way, in a real estate fund, those investors can be anybody. They can be any accredited, non-accredited. You can do a public offering, private offering, whatever you want to do. And that's a really good strategy. But what we dug into is, okay, how far can you take that concept? What if you're a fund that invests mostly in real estate, but also you are invested in local businesses? And once we dug into the details of what these things require, we realized that there is a really valuable strategy in there. And that strategy has come to be known as a diversified community investment fund, or what we call a DCIF. And the idea is simple. You have a real estate fund. It is fundamentally a real estate fund, but up to 40% of that fund's assets can consist of anything you want other than real estate. And it can also include, it can be, you can have as much real estate as you want to, as long as your securities investments don't exceed 40%. So what that means in practice is you can have a fund that acquires some real estate asset. Let's say a fund invests, let's just say 3 million. 3 million in a real estate project and owns this $3 million asset. Now, if that 3 million needs to comprise 60% of a fund, the other 40% can be any kind of investment you want, investing in local businesses, whether debt, equity, revenue share, whatever you want to do. And if you've got a $3 million real estate asset, that means your other assets can be as much as 2 million. So that now you have a fund that has a good solid real estate asset, but has $2 million potentially, assuming it can raise that capital, but legally can invest up to 2 million in any kind of investment in local business. And that kind of flexibility and ability to diversify its portfolio is what gave the fund its name, Diversified Community Investment Fund. So that's the concept that we've been working with several clients to develop. Now that happens to be what Jessica has done with her organization in Providence, Rhode Island.
So a couple of years ago, when we were just introducing, first of all, our Community Capital Accelerator program, which is when we bring to the table attorneys like Brian who are aligned with us and understand the securities laws, technical assistance, and training assistance in case communities don't have that. And many times they do not, because this is all very new space. This largely has evolved in the last decade or so. And so there aren't a ton of folks out there who know it. So in our accelerator, we bring those folks to the table with us if you don't have them in the community. Or, as Brian has done on a number of occasions, we co-counsel sometimes and find a local attorney who's aligned, has the same values as the community does, and then we can help out in that way. In any event, we introduced that accelerator, and very shortly after that, we introduced the idea of this diversified community investment funds. And one of the very first conversations we had was with the lovely Jessica David and her team at Local Return in Rhode Island. And so we have been working together with Jessica and other partners over the past couple of years to get to the place where they have actually launched our very first community investment fund, diversified community investment fund. So we're super proud of the work that Jessica and her team have done. So thanks very much. Congratulations. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. We're very proud of having launched the first DCIF in the country. Basically, we're very proud of getting this thing off the ground. Being the first one in the country is nice too. But like Chris said, I'm Jessica David, and I am the co-founder and president of actually two organizations probably relevant today. Local Return, which is a nonprofit organization that came together in 2020 and is focused on building community wealth in Rhode Island, particularly in neighborhoods that have experienced historic generational disinvestment. And also of the Rhode Island Community Investment Cooperative, which we founded to hold our diversified community investment fund. Local Return DCIF is an easier way to say it. So this goes back several years, like Chris mentioned. I think we've been working on it for over 3 years. And it really started when Local Return started. We were focused on community wealth. It was very early in COVID. And that was because my background is in philanthropy. My co-founder's background is in community work, business, banking, organizing, faith-based work, and all of us felt that there was something really missing from the conversation here in Rhode Island, that all of the efforts to make change, to make improvement were focused on, they were much more programmatic, focused on job training or, some business development, a lot of just, I don't want to say band-aids in a negative way because they're really critical and important services, but there wasn't really anyone at the time focused on building wealth and building assets and ownership in communities, not just for individuals, but also in places. And that was what we wanted to do. And the two strategies that we identified very early on were community investment and ownership. So those were our two focus areas. And the first thing we did was Michael Schumann did a series of workshops for us. We had about 50 or 60 people sign up. They were all virtual over a series of about a month. There were 4 workshops on local investing. So really trying to get people to be educated about what their opportunities were, to Chris's point about crowdfunding and other opportunities, and to buy into the why. So why should we be trying to invest in our places, even though it's as difficult as Brian says it is? And what we found at the end of that was that we convinced people, Michael convinced people, but folks were sold on the notion and the why, but most of us felt like we didn't want to go it alone. We didn't have the capacity, either financial capacity or the skills and expertise to do this on our own, and we didn't really want to. We wanted to come together. And so that brought us to this idea of a fund. And at Local Return, we really liked the concept of a fund because we're about building an ecosystem to build community wealth. It's not one individual intervention that's going to do it. And a fund felt like really critical infrastructure, and ecosystem-wide infrastructure. So we thought that was going to be easy, I think. And then we started talking to NC3 and realized that that was not the case. But yeah, I think it took us a little while maybe I think it took us a little while to be clear on what was important to us. And by the time Brian got involved, we had started to clarify that one, we really wanted a fund where people can pool money. We really wanted an opportunity for unaccredited, I call them like everyday Rhode Islanders to be able to invest into the fund. And we wanted a focus on place because, that was kind of our impetus for why we got started. And so when Brian and Chris came to us with the DCIF model, it really made a lot of sense for us. It aligned with our, neighborhood-based mission. Certainly we could have done that, by investing in businesses too, but when you think about real estate and how that sits in a place, and certainly in Rhode Island, there's been plenty of experiences where important real estate assets have been lost to communities because of harmful or disrespectful or exploitative or just kind of neglectful investment or ownership. We felt like that was the right fit for us, and it made a lot of sense from the very beginning.
And let me just finish up because we're near the end of our time, that what I love is the community-centric nature of this, because this is really what we're at. The heart of our work at NC3 is about community. The heart of these funds is about community. And by structuring the way that Jessica and her team did at Local Return, they have kept community at the heart and at the center of this in real and philosophical terms. So they're going to be the decision makers, those people. This is stakeholder primacy, as opposed to what we've heard for decades about shareholder primacy in the American corporate world. And that's really what we're all about: empowering communities, creating opportunities for those who have not had opportunity to build wealth individually and in their communities. And so we're just delighted and really excited about the work that Jessica and her team at Local Return have done. Catherine, anything that we missed, or any final comments for this particular program?
Just was hoping to say that I think we done it. I think we did a great job. Thank you all for sharing, and we hope everyone who tuned in learned a bit about the DCIF and how they maybe could start working on one in their communities.
Great.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all.